Africa is the new battleground for the global automotive industry. But this time, the competition isn't just about horsepower or luxury. It's about electric vehicles, infrastructure dominance, and access to the continent's fast-growing markets. In a race that could reshape economies and influence energy strategies for decades, one question emerges. How did China manage to outsmart Europe in Africa's electric car revolution? It wasn't luck. It wasn't coincidence. It was a strategy meticulously planned over years, combining industrial foresight, investment in local production, and partnerships with governments and communities. While European automakers debated regulations, pricing models, and logistical hurdles, Chinese companies were already rolling EVs off assembly lines, establishing charging networks, and integrating their vehicles into urban and rural transport systems. From Nigeria to Kenya, South Africa to Morocco, the streets began to tell the story. Chinese EVs appeared quietly but persistently: buses, taxis, delivery vehicles, all tailored to local conditions, energy constraints, and mobility needs. Meanwhile, European manufacturers struggled to adapt, hampered by bureaucracy, higher costs, and delayed deployments. Africa's urban centers quickly became testing grounds, and China moved faster, smarter, and with an almost surgical understanding of the market. Part of the strategy was supply chain control. China secured rare earth elements, battery production facilities, and local assembly lines before Europe could respond. This allowed Chinese companies to not only produce vehicles more cheaply, but also scale quickly to meet demand. It was a decisive advantage. When fleets needed expansion, Chinese EVs were ready, while European brands were still navigating approvals and regulations. But the story isn't just about technology or production. It's about perception and trust. Chinese companies offered flexible financing, leasing programs, and partnerships with municipal governments, creating an ecosystem that made adoption easier. European brands, often associated with high costs and slower innovation cycles, found themselves lagging, unable to match the speed of deployment or the cultural adaptability of their competitors. As African consumers and fleet operators embraced these EVs, the gap widened. Chinese EVs weren't just vehicles. They were symbols of reliability, accessibility, and modern mobility adapted to African realities. Europe's hesitancy and procedural delays turned into lost opportunities, leaving market share for China to claim, one city and one route at a time. Observers around the world began to notice. Analysts pointed to this as a paradigm shift. The continent that once imported European automobiles as a status symbol was now becoming a strategic stronghold for China's EV ambitions. The stakes were no longer just local, they were global. Control over Africa's transport infrastructure, adoption of sustainable energy solutions, and integration into supply chains positioned China to influence not just the automotive sector, but geopolitics, urban development, and industrial strategy across multiple continents. And yet, this race is far from over. European automakers are not standing still. They are recalibrating, exploring partnerships, and trying to understand how to compete with a strategy executed with precision and foresight. The question remains, can Europe catch up, or has China already established a near-unassailable lead in Africa's electric mobility revolution? Behind the headlines, beyond the corporate boardrooms, and on the streets of Africa, the true story is unfolding. Fleet by fleet, city by city, the future of mobility is being written, and it's a story of speed, strategy, and relentless execution. In Lagos, Nairobi, and Johannesburg, the transformation is visible in real time. Streets once dominated by diesel taxis and imported European sedans now showcase fleets of Chinese electric buses and delivery vehicles moving efficiently and silently. Local authorities report reduced emissions, lower operating costs, and surprisingly high public acceptance. Meanwhile, European automakers are scrambling, trying to retrofit existing models for local conditions and catch up to a network already in motion. The advantage China holds isn't just in numbers, it's in integration. Charging stations, battery swapping hubs, and service networks are embedded within communities and urban infrastructure. Chinese companies invested not only in vehicles, but also in the ecosystem that keeps them running. Europe, by contrast, often presents vehicles without the supporting infrastructure, leaving gaps in accessibility, reliability, and consumer confidence. Behind closed doors, European executives analyze the pace at which Chinese EVs are expanding. For every regulatory obstacle, Chinese teams find a workaround. For every market challenge, there's a local partnership, a financing solution, or a culturally adapted design ready to deploy. It's not just market penetration, it's market dominance through anticipation and adaptability. The battle isn't limited to cities. Rural and semi-urban areas, often overlooked by global manufacturers, have become a critical testing ground. In towns where electricity is intermittent and logistics are challenging, Chinese EVs thrive through modular designs and energy-efficient systems. Local entrepreneurs adopt them as taxis, minibuses, and cargo transport, quickly demonstrating the practical superiority of a system designed to fit local realities rather than impose foreign expectations. Meanwhile, Europe struggles with perception. While their EVs carry prestige, high-end technology, and brand recognition, these attributes are often secondary to reliability, cost-effectiveness, and availability, the very metrics that African operators value most. In effect, European brands are competing in the wrong dimension while China dominates the practical aspects of everyday mobility. Global analysts are watching closely. The implications extend far beyond cars. Access to critical supply chains, influence over African industrial policy, and control over emerging EV standards all hinge on who dominates the continent first. For China, Africa is not just a market, it's a strategic foothold. For Europe, it is a warning. Hesitation and bureaucratic delays can translate directly into lost influence. And yet, the story is still unfolding. Each new fleet deployed, each city adopting Chinese EV infrastructure, strengthens the momentum. Every delay or misstep by European manufacturers further widens the gap. Africa's streets are quietly becoming the proving grounds for the future of global electric mobility, a future that China has already started to shape. The question now is not just who can sell vehicles, but who can sustain influence, control supply chains, and integrate seamlessly into Africa's evolving transport ecosystem. And as this quiet revolution spreads across the continent, one truth becomes increasingly clear. The winner of Africa's electric car race may well set the rules for global mobility for decades to come. The tipping point is already emerging in subtle but unmistakable ways. In major African cities, Chinese EVs begin to dominate public transport routes. Buses, minibuses, and taxis roll silently through the streets, their presence almost invisible to the casual observer, but impossible to ignore for those tracking market share. Each vehicle represents not just mobility, but infrastructure, financing, and long-term influence consolidated in one integrated system. European manufacturers respond, but their moves are reactive rather than proactive. They announce new EV models, partnerships, and incentives, but often too little, too late. Logistics chains struggle to meet demand, while charging networks remain sparse and inconsistent. In contrast, China's ecosystem already functions end-to-end. Production, distribution, operation, and maintenance are synchronized to create seamless adoption at scale. Investors and analysts begin comparing numbers. Fleet costs, energy efficiency, maintenance cycles, local support networks. Every metric shows a widening gap, favoring Chinese EVs. Governments, seeing immediate benefits, lower emissions, reduced operating costs, and increased mobility, start favoring Chinese models for public contracts. Europe's hesitation is now translating into lost contracts, delayed deployment, and shrinking influence. Rural regions, long considered inaccessible for advanced technology, become the next battleground. Modular, durable Chinese EVs penetrate small towns, connecting remote communities with urban centers. Farmers, entrepreneurs, and small business owners adopt these vehicles for commerce, showing that adaptability and cost-effectiveness outweigh brand prestige. In these regions, Europe struggles to compete, offering high-end vehicles that are impractical for local needs. Meanwhile, the global narrative begins to shift. Media outlets highlight China's strategic foresight and rapid execution. Analysts discuss the long-term implications. who controls Africa's EV infrastructure, controls not only transport but critical supply chains, urban planning, and future energy distribution. The continent, long a prize in the geopolitical arena, is now a proving ground for next-generation mobility, and China holds the first-mover advantage. Policymakers in Europe scramble to respond. Investment funds are redirected. Alliances with African governments are proposed. But the challenge remains: catching up to a system that was designed for speed, scale, and local integration from the start. Europe is no longer competing solely on technology. It's competing against momentum. And in cities across Africa, the streets tell the story in real time. The silent hum of Chinese EVs moving efficiently, economically, and reliably contrasts sharply with the delayed, partially deployed European alternatives. Consumers and fleet operators vote with their adoption, signaling a shift that will resonate far beyond the continent. The battle lines are drawn. Africa's EV race is no longer theoretical. It's active, visible, and decisive. And while Europe works to regroup, the continent's streets have already become the proving ground for a new global order in transportation, one where speed, adaptability, and strategic foresight define the winner. As adoption accelerates, the impact of China's strategy begins to ripple beyond the automotive sector. Urban planning adapts around the influx of Chinese EVs. Charging hubs become integrated into city infrastructure. Traffic flows are optimized for energy-efficient routes, and fleet management systems link vehicles to real-time data networks. The result is a mobility ecosystem that feels almost organic, expanding naturally as demand grows. Meanwhile, Europe's delayed response sparks internal debates. Executives push for faster production, localized assembly, and aggressive partnerships, but bureaucratic red tape and entrenched business models slow the process. Each delayed launch further cements China's lead, as fleets already in operation capture public trust, establish reliability, and integrate into daily life. In parallel, rural Africa experiences its own quiet revolution. Farmers, small business owners, and local transport operators begin adopting Chinese EVs at scale. Vehicles that can operate reliably without complex infrastructure or frequent maintenance transform commerce and connectivity. Markets that were once constrained by energy limitations now see a surge in efficiency and opportunity, a practical proof of how technology tailored to local realities can outperform legacy systems. The geopolitical implications grow clearer by the day. China isn't just selling cars, it's building influence. Access to supply chains, infrastructure contracts, and urban mobility solutions give it a foothold in decision-making processes across the continent. Europe, despite decades of legacy partnerships and established brands, finds itself increasingly reactive, struggling to reclaim momentum. At the same time, public perception drives adoption. African consumers and local governments begin to associate Chinese EVs with reliability, affordability, and practicality. European brands, though prestigious, are seen as slow, costly, and ill-adapted. The shift isn't just economic, it's cultural. Mobility becomes a tangible example of how strategy, foresight, and adaptability can outperform reputation and heritage. International analysts take note. Reports emerge highlighting China's strategic edge in securing rare earth materials, developing battery technology, and creating scalable manufacturing ecosystems, all aligned with Africa's growth trajectory. Europe's hesitancy, once subtle, now becomes glaring. Each fleet deployed, each rural route connected, and each city integrating the technology reinforces the perception that the future of African mobility is being written with Chinese ink. Meanwhile, in the streets, the story is undeniable. The quiet hum of Chinese EVs moving efficiently, silently, and consistently across urban and rural landscapes becomes the soundtrack of Africa's new mobility era. Routes once dominated by diesel vehicles now tell a different story, one of speed, efficiency, and strategic foresight. And yet, the race is far from over. Europe is mobilizing, governments are strategizing, and competition is intensifying. But the momentum China has generated through careful planning, rapid deployment, and localized adaptation has set a pace that will be difficult to match. Africa has become the proving ground, the chessboard, and the stage where global influence will be measured not just in cars sold, but in the networks, trust, and infrastructure built around them. The question now isn't whether Europe can catch up, it's whether it can redefine the rules fast enough to reclaim relevance in a continent that is already moving forward. Specialized assembly lines are made, and incentives are rolled out. Yet every move is measured against the backdrop of an already operational Chinese network, vehicles that are tested, trusted, and seamlessly integrated into city and rural life. Meanwhile, China continues to advance. Battery production facilities expand, service networks grow, and local partnerships deepen. Training programs for mechanics, fleet operators, and municipal planners ensure that the ecosystem surrounding the vehicles remains robust. This isn't just about selling cars. It's about embedding an entire technological infrastructure into the continent's transport systems, securing influence at multiple levels simultaneously. The effects on Africa's economy are profound. Reduced transport costs, lower emissions, and reliable mobility allow businesses to flourish. Supply chains that were once constrained by fuel shortages or charging delays now operate smoothly. Urban mobility becomes more predictable, and even remote communities gain unprecedented connectivity. The ripple effect extends beyond transportation, influencing commerce, logistics, and daily life across the continent. European executives and policymakers watch closely, recognizing that technology alone won't bridge the gap. Brand prestige, engineering excellence, and luxury features cannot compensate for the speed, adaptability, and local integration China has already achieved. Every delay reinforces the lesson. In Africa, practical deployment trumps theoretical superiority. Global analysts begin issuing warnings. The African EV market, once considered a secondary opportunity, is now a strategic battleground. Whoever controls fleets, infrastructure, and supply chains in Africa can set standards, influence policy, and dominate emerging markets for decades to come. China has already claimed the first-mover advantage, while Europe is forced into catch-up mode, trying to rewrite strategies that may already be obsolete. On the streets, the difference is undeniable. Chinese EVs glide silently through bustling cities, across highways, and along rural routes. Fleet operators rely on them. Governments endorse them. Communities embrace them. European vehicles, no matter how advanced, struggle to gain the same foothold, hampered by slow rollout, higher costs, and less adaptable support systems. And yet, the tension of the race builds. Europe is resourceful, technologically capable, and historically influential. The continent is mobilizing its best minds, fastest factories, and largest brands in a concerted effort to reclaim its position. Contracts are negotiated, incentives offered, and ambitious plans announced. But each initiative is measured against an already moving system, one that China designed not just to enter Africa, but to dominate it from day one. The unfolding battle is no longer just about vehicles. It's about strategy, foresight, and execution. Africa has become the stage where global power, technological leadership, and practical innovation collide. And while Europe scrambles to catch up, every route completed, every fleet integrated, and every community connected continues to tip the balance. The question is no longer who will participate in Africa's EV revolution. It's who will define its rules, shape its infrastructure, and secure influence for the next generation. The race for Africa's electric vehicle market has reached a tipping point. China's foresight, speed, and strategic integration have transformed the continent into a proving ground for next-generation mobility. Every fleet deployed, every route optimized, and every community connected strengthens a network that Europe is still struggling to penetrate. European brands, despite their history, prestige, and technological prowess, are now playing catch-up in a game China has already begun to win. Africa, once viewed as a secondary market, has emerged as the decisive battleground for influence, infrastructure, and innovation. And as the silent hum of Chinese EVs fills the streets, from bustling cities to remote villages, the world watches. The continent is no longer waiting for others to define its mobility future. Africa is in motion, rewriting the rules, and demonstrating that strategy, adaptability, and execution matter more than legacy or reputation. The story of the African EV revolution isn't just about cars. It's about vision, opportunity, and the power of moving first. And in this race, one lesson is clear. In Africa's electric vehicle market, momentum is everything, and the future belongs to those who seize it first.